Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. I'm the president of Ubiquity University. And on behalf of our university and our global broadcast, Humanity Rising, I want to welcome all of you to our online summit on UFO UAP disclosure in Europe. Ubiquity has dedicated itself to innovative learning on a range of cutting-edge issues since our founding back in 1996. We're one of a handful of universities anywhere in the world that have programs on the extraterrestrial phenomenon or unidentified anomalous phenomena. We are the only university, as far as we know, that has master's and PhD degrees in extraterrestrial studies, where in partnership with Transdimensional Mapping, one of the premier remote viewing organizations in the world, we're teaching people worldwide about extraterrestrial awareness and how to engage through remote viewing and mental telepathy in intelligible communication with extraterrestrial beings. It's a very exciting program. You're all welcome to join the various courses that we are offering. And as part of our public service around this extraordinarily seminal issue of our time, Ubiquity and a range of partners have been convening online summits like the one today on various aspects of the UAP domain. We've had a series of summits on the whole issue area of psionics, the application of consciousness to understanding these extraterrestrial beings, and the application of remote viewing and technology in enhancing human capacities in learning the language of consciousness, because we know that the extraterrestrial beings, no matter who they are or where they appear anywhere in the world, they engage in humans through mental telepathy. We wanted to emphasize Europe today because it was, in fact, in Europe in 1933 that we had the first really demonstrable evidence of an alien craft landing. And many people count that event as the beginning of the modern UFO UAP era. So thank you for joining us. I want to now introduce and turn the program over to Georg Boch, who's our Director of Technology and has been working with me and others in the formation of our extraterrestrial studies program as coordinator for the ET program and also our program in artificial intelligence. So welcome, Georg, and I turn the program over to you.
Thank you, Jim. It's a great honor to have so many vital voices from the European UAP disclosure movement here with us today. This Ubiquity Summit is about amplifying the disclosure movement's impact beyond national borders or cultural differences that we have here in Europe. I want to thank the global disclosure community for promoting this event. Channels like Ross Coulthard, Vinnie Adams, Hollywood, Disclosure Party, Alien Contact, ICER, Exo Magazine TV, Skywatch and UFO TV Actuel, and the Czech UFO conference in November have come together and supported this event. UAP disclosure is not just an American affair. It is now an unstoppable global process that invites every nation on Earth to contribute their piece of the puzzle in understanding this phenomenon in the face of which we are one species, one planet. So what is the context of this summit? It is the accelerating pace of UAP disclosure in the United States, driven by people with undeniable credentials, speaking up under oath, confirming the reality of UAP legacy programs and a UAP NHI presence. As former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense, Christopher Mellon stated last week in a video, he said, a large and growing body of evidence is indicating that at least one civilization has located Earth and is monitoring us, perhaps even seeking to influence the trajectory of our development. What was once secret has now become too big to hold. Victor Hugo once said, nothing is as powerful as an idea whose time has come. And what is happening in the US has indeed become a global wake-up call. Japan has heard it, Brazil has heard it, but have we in Europe really heard it yet? Or have we preferred to hit snooze, hoping somebody else will handle this biggest paradigm shift in human history for us? Let's face it. Disclosure in the US has become a serious movement, but with players from bipartisan politics, industry, legal, tech, academia, and of course, civilian engagement. In comparison to Europe, the US discourse is now at zero doubt. The actual conversation in Congress is not about if the phenomenon is real, but how to react to the UAP presence and retrieve the existing hidden knowledge, hidden by 80 years of unconstitutional secrecy, so that it may finally benefit society at large. While the US is far from an official consensus on UAPs, UAP tech, innovation, and science are not about consensus, especially not in America. This year, we have seen Silicon Valley initiatives like the recent UAP hackathon in San Francisco and UAP aerial intelligence startups such as Skywatchers AI that work at the intersection of state and private enterprise. In fact, Total Capital is even filed for an ETF tied to UAP-related technologies in the US. Not unlike the artificial intelligence revolution, where Europe is now desperately trying to catch up, we stand at the brink of another transformative shift. Just like we went from skepticism to undeniable reality, almost overnight with AI in November 2022 with ChatGPT, the UAP reality and UAP adjacent technologies are approaching their own critical threshold moment as we speak. 2025 is to the UAP economy what 2017 was to AI. In the UAP Fund hearing with members of Congress in Washington, D.C. on May 1st, Dr. Anna Brady Estevez stated that the UAP tech race is on. In 2025, we are at the point where UAP-inspired or adjacent technologies are converging rapidly with advanced technologies like artificial intelligence, quantum computing, material science, or advanced drone propulsion. The study of UAPs in all their aspects serves as a proof of concept, a possible back engineering blueprint for frontier technologies. One can compare this to how neuroscience helped and inspired AI engineers. For example, neural networks, which are part of large language models, are a way of back engineering aspects of how our brain works. Talking more openly about UAP adjacent tech that includes previously classified branches of physics is a parallel track of UAP disclosure in the US that is not discussed enough. Prominent scientists, including Dr. Eric Davis and Hal Puthoff, have publicly discussed how UAP crash retrieval materials are indeed inspiring groundbreaking research and engineering on NASA-endorsed podcasts. Let that sink in. Like the Shoshin Work Ecosystemic Futures podcast in last December. If UAP-related science holds even a fraction of the transformative potential hinted at, then staying disengaged here in Europe would leave us utterly behind. We're talking about advantages in multi-trillion euro markets. The way the German car industry did not take the electric car serious and is now struggling is nothing compared to what we're facing here. Ignoring UAP and NHI research is no longer tenable, especially in times of what seems retreating interest from transatlantic partnership from the US. Europe has a strategic necessity to take stock and connect what it knows on all levels of engagement about the phenomenon and the disruptive technology and security questions that are linked to it. By treating the UAP issue as an opportunity rather than a taboo, we can catalyze advances in aerospace and energy and our understanding of consciousness or life itself. Europe has a rich history of science driving enlightenment. It should not remain in the dark on this frontier. We are full of potential and could champion a civilian-led, transparent investigation of the UAP phenomena, not based on a military-industrial threat narrative, but on actual interdisciplinary science. But right now, our institutions appear overly cautious, and our cross-national awareness in Europe regarding UAPs remains fragmented. Institutional EU-level response seems absent, with the exception of the first European parliamentary hearing on UAPs in March 2024. And we are very honored to have Francisco Guerreiro, the initiator of that seminal event, with us here today. So Francisco, if you're here with us, I would invite you to turn on your camera. Francisco represented Portugal in the European Parliament from 2019 through the end of 2024. While in office, he convened the Parliament's first public briefing on UAP aviation safety and filed motions for an EU-wide reporting system, insisting that the debate be guided by scientific method. Now working outside of Brussels, he remains a high-profile advocate for transparency on anomalous phenomena. Francisco, thank you for being with us here.
Now, thanks for the invitation.
Where are you joining us from, Francisco, tonight?
From Sintra, Portugal.
Oh,
really
wonderful. So one of the questions that's really on my mind is, what was this moment for you when you realized that you needed to do this hearing? Was there any specific moment?
Yes, it was brought up by the courage of the hearing that was taken in US, so the Congress hearing on UAPs, and the testimony of those professionals that are very qualified, and they put their personal and professional lives at jeopardy to speak the truth. And what they just wanted was an honest response by the politicians and a scientific debate on things that they don't understand, and they wanted to learn more. And well, this has several correlations to civil aviation, military and defense, even philosophically. But the main thing that struck me was the honesty of these individuals that put their lives at stake for one simple, key, important thing that I think humanity is struggling to push forward, that is the truth. And politicians should be aware of this will that is brought up by millions of people.
And based on the briefings you had, what is your personal view on the likelihood of UAPs representing some kind of non-human intelligence?
Well, I can give you a perspective of the European landscape, to be more concrete, because this is about the European path. And I would also like to thank you the courage to focus on our path towards this disclosure that might be different from the US, although overall we are in the same fight. But for example, in France, we have GEOPAN, that is the agency that analyzes these events. And if you look at the data from this institution, it has the analysis of the events, and then it has 3% of the analysis that they don't know what it is. And they are very thorough, they are very scientific, but in that analysis, 3% of the events, they don't know what it is. And so if we don't know what it is, this 3%, maybe we need to improve our technology, maybe we need to communicate with other EU member states, maybe we should have a correlation between defense, civil aviation, and space. And so there's so much that can be done, but we are with a huge stigma surrounding this topic. And so I think it's really relevant, and I never saw any phenomena. I'm very skeptical, but I think we should always strive to understand more. And if you don't know, we should ask for that information, and politicians should have the courage to scientifically and honestly search for the data and the replies to really know what's happening.
Thank you. And do you have a recommendation for European UAP researchers right now? What do you think they should be doing to keep the momentum you created alive?
Well, I think politically there's no will, because I don't see anyone after 1 year doing anything about the subject, which is unfortunately. I think that can be more pressure from the civil society organizations like yourselves trying to pinpoint one member of the European Parliament that might be open to continue this discussion. And there's a lot of tools that can be brought to this work. You have speeches in the plenary, you have motions, you have amendments to reports that are being made. You can make events, you can make so many things with the resources that you have as a member of the European Parliament. But the thing that is lacking is will, unfortunately.
Will, yeah. When I researched this subject and spoke to several people, it seemed as if there is a real stigma, especially around this idea of non-human intelligence. What was your kind of feedback you got after the hearing? Were there any certain subjects that were especially sensitive or things that you got reflected?
Well, before, I had several individuals saying to me that I shouldn't do it because I have a great track record on my parliamentary work. And I should not stain it by talking about this issue. And I said, well, it's the opposite. I think I have the obligation to do it because no one is talking about it. And if people so professional in several key areas of our society are willing to come forward and ask the questions that need to be made, and they want answers, I also have that responsibility as a politician. And so I believe in democracy, transparency. Obviously, we have degrees. I'm not saying that we should open the book and just reveal everything if there's anything to reveal, because there's layers, and obviously we are touching probably some issues that are complicated, but individuals need the truth. And one of the problems is that since humanity is not giving the correct answers and the path, they don't believe in traditional politics. They are pushing itself more and more to the extremes. We are not even recognizing now the scientific method when we are debating issues, for example, climate change. And so I think it's a path that we really need to do as a society and especially as politicians.
Thank you so much, Francisco, for doing this hearing. I think you really made a big difference, especially for the people in Europe. And I think everybody in this community and beyond in the future, in history, will be grateful to what you did. So we thank you, and we will move on in the program now, but we will be hoping to hear from you later in the panel. So thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for all that you do.
No, okay.
All right. Now, after hearing about Europe's political state, let's connect this a bit to the American UAP conversation and to Europe's history of UAP sightings and crashes. One case that stands out is, of course, the 1933 Magenta crash, the European Roswell before Roswell, as some may say. This case gained attention through the confirmation by Grosch, Elizondo, and Malgrim. To learn more about it, I have today here a real, I would say a legend of European ufology with us, Roberto Pinotti. Roberto, I will turn on your camera so that we may see you and I may introduce you. There you are. I'm going to ask to unmute you. Wonderful to see you. So Roberto is a legend in European ufology. You can't say it any other way. He was trained in political science and sociology at the University of Florence, and he served as a missile brigadier officer before turning his lifelong fascination with unexplained aerial phenomena into a career in aerospace and social research. In 1967, it's quite a while ago, he founded the Centro Ufologico Nazionale, curating one of the world's largest private UFO archives. Pinotto chairs the executive board of ICER and has authored more than 40 books, including the seminal 2-volume UFO Context in Italy. His 5 decades of scholarship have been honored also astronomically. Asteroid 12470 Pinotti carries your name. Thank you for being here, Roberto.
Thank you to everybody. Okay. Well, since everything seems starting with the Magenta case, well, just to begin, let's say that, well, in the beginning, I had a very particular experience. When I was an officer in a NATO unit during the Cold War in 1972, I was asked by my command to prepare a lecture for the superior officers of our unit. Next, please. And this presentation was a success, but next one, please. There is something else to be said. You see, the next one, please. What is important to say is that when I was told to prepare this conference, a couple of American colleagues, a captain and a lieutenant of the United States Army, went to me and asked me, by the way, but do you know that we in the States have the crashed UFOs and the bodies of the pilots? Frankly, it was 1972. I was very surprised. Next one, please. But you see, probably it's the case to remember that the problem of UFO crashes began to emerge only in 1979, so you understand. Really, in Italy, everything many years later was emerged when I received in 1996 some old documents from an unknown source. Well, this unknown source was really the family of Count Galeazzo Ciano. Next one, please. Count Galeazzo Ciano was the foreign minister, the Minister of Foreign Affairs during the fascist regime. He was really Mussolini's son-in-law. And as far as we know, the mysterious sender who sent us a lot of material about this was Fabrizio Ciano, the third son of Galeazzo. He wrote also a book about his father who was executed in the final drama of the fascist regime by Hitler's orders. The next one, please. Well, everything focused about the fact that an unknown object had crashed near Magenta in northern Italy in 1933. The next one, please. What we had to do when we received this material was to verify, as we did, everything. But what is important is that we had also original documents. So we had to have a forensic analysis made on them. And the ink and paper analysis by the Como Tribunal forensic expert, Dr. Antonio Garavaglia, proved that they were old and authentic in any case. The next one, please. Yes, here you see not only the document of the original analysis of the Como Tribunal, but also a copy, a simple page of one of the reports. This is a report which took place in 1936 and had to do with the sighting of an elongated objects followed by two smaller objects like a priest hat in the sky of Venice and Mestre. The next one, please. And everything was inside this envelope we received. You see this an envelope of the Senate of the Kingdom of Italy, And in it, you may read that it has to do with the foreign minister, the foreign affairs minister, Galeazzo Ciano. The next one, please. Yes, here you see a sketch of that particular sighting. You see this object and the two smaller objects Saturn-shaped. The next one, please. We had also an original telegram having to do with the necessity of a total secret about this sighting. This was exactly what the Italian authorities did. A complete censorship on this sighting in 1936. The next one, please. Yes, but what we discovered later was extremely impressive. Really, the mysterious informant had sent original documents to a very important newspaper in Bologna. Unfortunately, all this was not considered, and this material was not only it was not published, but they destroyed the documents. So this guy had also to send photocopies later, as you see. The next one, please. What is interesting is this telegram in which we may read that the fascist government started a completely cover-up about the 1933 crash near Magenta. Nobody had to know this. The next one, please. This telegram says that on the personal order of Il Duce, absolutely no mention is to be made of the alleged landing of an unknown aircraft on national soil. The same applies to today's news due to publication by the Stefani Agency and individual journalists. Maximum penalty for non-compliance will be enforced by the Tribunal of State Security. So nobody could understand and know nothing about this event. Please, the next one. Yes, the object was sent to the CI Marchetti aircraft factory, and there a group of scientists took care of it. This group of scientists was were the scientists who formed the cabinet RS-33. RS stands for Special Research. And 33 has really nothing to do with the year. We discovered that in the archives in Milan, there are about 100 telegrams sent by the prefects of the Kingdom of Italy to the chief of the government, that is Mussolini. And the subject was, of course, what we call today the UFO sightings, or how they call them, unconventional flying vehicles. So you should understand that the section in which all this was filed was the one having to do with new inventions and brevets, that is reverse engineering. And so you understand why. The next one. Yes, this is the reason I express it now. Okay, let's go on. Yes, who was involved in this cabinet? Of course, the director, Guglielmo Marconi, who was the president of the Royal Academy of Sciences of Italy, and the air minister, Italo Balbo, along with Galeazzo Ciano, who was the foreign affairs minister of Italy and Mussolini's son-in-law. Let's go on. The other scientists involved are this one. You see, De Blasi, Cecchini, Giordani, Severi, Cozza, Vallauri, Pirotta, Bottazzi, Crocco. They were all members of the Italian Science Academy. But nobody knew anything about this, of course. It was a secret involvement. Let's go on. What is interesting is that in any case, we know that after 1934, 1935, in Italy there were interesting new studies about what they called the super aviation. And for instance, we have here a project of a, we may call this a flying saucer. This flying machine was conceived by Richard Mite and Giuseppe Belluzzo, and was a sort of Italian-German flying saucer. It was not built, but it was conceived by these two guys, okay? Let's go on. We wrote, of course, a book about all this. Everything started in 2000 in 3 different editions. Let's go on. Not only, some years later, we had also a very unexpected witness from the United States. That is the son of a lieutenant colonel pilot of the United States Army Air Force, William Brophy Jr. This aviator told his son that he has to do with a crashed UFO in Italy, the so-called Mussolini UFO. Of course, it was just an information, nothing else. But later, let's go on. We invited Luis Elizondo in Italy and in San Marino too for our annual World Congress. And in 2021, he had an interview with Max Moskowitz. And in this interview, he admitted something about the Mussolini UFO. We were very surprised, asked him, but where did you get the information? From our studies or not? And he said, no, this has to do with my intelligence. Let's go on. And then we have what made this known to the entire world, David Grush. David Grush was the guy who admitted all this. And of course, the problem is that probably the Italian, the United States Ministry, Department of Defense, probably they did not know that we had already started this in Italy. The next one. Yes, what, as you know, what Grush said was that the object was captured in 1945 in northern Italy after the defeat of the Nazi army, thanks to the OSS, the Office of Strategic Services, was the precursor to the CIA, and was sent to the United States. By the way, this object was a bell-shaped UFO from 10 to 12 meters, and now, as far as we know, all this is in the USA. Let's go on. Oh, at this point, we had some else to be shown. Some letters given us by a former Italian premier, Giulio Andreotti. And so we decided to expose all this. These letters had to do with the Italian Secret Service of the fascist regime. And in these letters, agents of this authority mentioned the activity of the cabinet RS-33. And where did all this took place? In Mount Sorate. Mount Sorate was a sort of Italian Cheyenne mountain. It was created by Mussolini 4 kilometers from Rome, with an incredible number of tunnels in this mountain. And the next one, please. And in this mountain, many secret studies were faced. By the way, and we did not expect such a thing, the nephew of Guglielmo Marconi had an interview, an open interview with an important Italian weekly magazine, and he admitted that his grandfather really was the director of Cabinet RS-33. So this was another proof about this. Let's go on. And 2 more proofs. The Daily Mail Online found an unexpected witness. That is, the mayor of Arona before World War II told his nephew, Mario Negri, that he had witnessed the fall of what he called this an unknown flying superfortress. It had, of course, been taken by the fascist authorities, and this is what he told him. Not only, another witness, the next one, please, was Lieutenant Alfonso Carminati. You may see him in this photo in Ethiopia with some of his colleagues, because he reported exactly the same thing to his nephew. So you see that after 90 years, we have the immersion of witnesses, and this is extremely incredible. Let's go on. At this point, we wrote a final report, a 600 pages illustrated text, which was published in Italy last year. I may only hope that this may be published also in English, because I think it will be the case. The next one. And then now we have also the statements by the presidential advisor, Harold Malgrams, who said exactly the same things. So it seems that the Magenta case is no longer a secret. Okay, I think that this may be enough, briefly,
Yes.
as you told me to do.
Yes. I think we should make a several-week course with you to fully understand all these let's say, Italian or European crash retrieval programs. There's so much there, and I think in Europe we still have a lot of catching up to do when it comes to understanding this part of history. So thank you so much, Roberto, for being here with us today. And
it was a pleasure, and it was a duty after all.
Yes, and it's an honor for us to have you here, and we also want to thank you from the European community for the seminal work that you've been doing over all these decades to lay the groundwork of ultimately actual disclosure. So thank you so much for all that you represent. Okie dokie. Well, this was Roberto from Italy, and now let's see if we were able to fix Franck Maurin's tech situation. Franck, are you with us? Are we able to hear you? I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself. Do you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Fantastic. Well, now we've heard we were in Portugal, we were in Italy, and of course, we could not do a European UAP summit without going to the great nation of France, especially because there's such an interesting relationship to the UAP phenomenon. So, Franck, we have a few slides that we will very briefly look at with you, just to get some idea of this very rich history of UAPs in France. So I'm going to share my screen, and we will be super brief, of course.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for the invitation. And I am a French author specialist in history on UFO pilot encounters. So I will present you major UFO French event. In the first document, you can see one of the first pilot sighting in France in 1951. Colonel Raymond Galibert and two other pilots were chasing a flying disc in the south of France. He was interviewed by the famous ufologist Jimmy Gueux, who published his first book on UFO in France in 1952, called Flying Saucer Come From Another World. This year was a major worldwide wave of UFO sighting, as evidenced of the 200 unexplained cases listed for that year in the Blue Book report. In France, we also had some strange events. For example, these cases of flying cylinders accompanied by numerous discs or spheres flying around them, seen in Oloron-Sainte-Marie and Gaillac. we can go to the next slide, please, which concerning the year 1954, which was the largest wave of sighting ever observed in France. For several months, every day, in all French region, but also in Italy and other European countries, multiple UFOs were observed, mainly disks, cigars, spheres, and luminous shape. Some could move very quickly and perform maneuvers impossible to replicate for official aeronautic, such as hovering flight followed by dazzling acceleration. There are 1,000 of press articles like this. For example, the website UFO at a Closed Site by Patrick Gross has collected more than 2,300 cases, explained or not explained, documented by Period Archive for the year 1954. The following slide, please, mention repeated incident at nuclear power plant in France. Between late 2014 and early 2015, more than 15 nuclear power plants were overflown by unidentified luminous flying objects. On some days, up to 6 distant nuclear power plants were approached. The media spoke of drones. However, the performance of these unknown flying objects, particularly their autonomy, their ability to fly at night against strong wind, and their ability to evade pursuing military helicopters, cast doubt on whether they were simple drones. Despite heavy surveillance equipment deployed by the French army, officially, no one has ever managed to determine who was piloting these drones. It looked like a surveillance or tracking operation. Before and after 2014, there were many UFO intrusions at military and French nuclear sites, but it would take too long to list them all tonight. On the next slide, please. Here is a commentary report. Its publication in 1999 was a major event in French ufology. It was written by 2 generals, scientists, pilots, and engineers. Analyzing a list of French and foreign UFO cases, it concluded the almost certain physical reality of totally unknown flying objects with remarkable flight performance and silence, apparently driven by intelligence, specifying that the extraterrestrial hypothesis is by far the best scientific hypothesis. It is certainly not categorically proven, but there are strong presumptions in its favor, and if it's correct, it's fraught with consequences. Commentary report received little press coverage in France, but it was uploaded elsewhere, for example, by Leslie Keane. Next slide, please. Here is a presentation of JPON, which is a French public organization dedicated to the study of the unidentified aerospace phenomena called PON. It was created in 1977. 3,000 studied cases are freely accessible on this website. Approximately 100 are considered unexplained. The friends of this organization are the following. JPON has a network of field investigators and various technical specialists. It put online interesting ufological archive, sometimes including police report. It's a large database. However, this organization is sometimes criticized, notably for the following reason. Many important French ufological events are absent or underrepresented in this database. For example, there are only 20 cases from the 1954 wave, while other private ufological organizations list more than 2,000. For example, it can also be noted that the wave of drones targeting French nuclear power plant was not investigated by JPON, and it's not included in its database. Furthermore, independent investigators sometimes dispute the conclusion of some investigation attributing UFO cases to misunderstanding, for example, to Thailanders. In any case, without entering it into controversy, it can be said that the JPON provide a good library of cases of unidentified aerospace phenomena. Next slide, please. You can see here a list of some French UFO association working group on private and independent database. This is not exhaustive. There are many others that will take too long to list. I will cite just a few examples, such as the famous MUFION, such as Base OVNI France database that gather around 3,000 UFO cases, or media outlets specializing in information processing, such as Sentinel News or UAP Check. At SIPO, we bring together about 15 associations. We are an independent group with no hierarchy or leader, and we carry out collective actions such as the consolidation of archives. We also sent a technical report to French President Emmanuel Macron to inform and raise awareness about the UFO issue. In summary, French ufology is very active. Regarding my own work, I am currently conducting and publishing a compilation of UFO sightings by aircraft pilots around the world. More than 3,000 pilots have officially testified. These testimonies of aerospace professionals are sufficiently documented, credible, and recurrent to support the reality of the UFO phenomenon. In summary, I would say that since the incident of Foo Fighters during World War II and the great UFO wave of the 1950s in the world, I have counted in the archive about 20 UFO flight characteristics and performance that cannot be reproduced by official aviation. All these are concordant clues pointing to possible non-human intelligence. I will be available in due course to share this information. This is the conclusion, and thank you all everybody for your attention.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Franck. Yes, and I really, really appreciate the way you presented that there is Japan in France, and that's actually quite an achievement compared to other countries. But still, you also said there might be some sightings that are underrepresented. So I really applaud your rigor in investigating this. I think, from my perspective, you're almost like something like a French Richard Dolan in the exactness of which you have cataloged all these sightings. So thank you so much, Franck. And if you can stick around, it would be wonderful to see you in the panel later. And I hope people can check out the recording of this and see all the URLs and check out all the wonderful websites that you mentioned here, so we can better understand really the incredible richness and multifacetedness of UAP and NHI presence in Europe since the end of World War II. So now we're going to move on in our program, and I would like to talk about the fact that probably we could prepare presentations like this for every country in Europe. We could be here for days seeing all kinds of sightings from decades and encounters with this rich history. And at some point, we actually must wonder, right? Why isn't the UAP theme not more part of our mass psychology here, right? The way it is in America. Why is it more of a thing here? Is it perhaps because we don't have an alternative media scene, like in the US, where we have podcasts like Joe Rogan that has UA people on all the time and they reach millions? Or is it maybe because we're just culturally fragmented by language, history, unable to relate to each other's cosmic encounters? So often people blame that the reason that these sightings are not more known is conspiratorial thinking. So there's a conspiracy to keep this down. And this is definitely true, but maybe there's also something else that keeps us from talking about this. Maybe there is some kind of resistance to change our worldview, to the paradigm shift that UAPs represent in our personal cosmology, right? Europe is old enough. We already went through at least one fundamental paradigm shift with the Copernican revolution, but the UAP phenomena implies another one. And so in this next section, we'll be hearing from two experts on paradigm shifting transformations. And I'm now very pleased and honored to hand the program over to my dear colleague, Dr. Felix Hoch. Felix is a Berlin-based transformation and innovation consultant for organizations with a background in wisdom in cultural studies. Hi, Felix, how are you?
Hey, good.
Yeah.
Thanks
And
for having me.
Felix, yes, and Felix also helped me organize this conference and conceive the structure of it. So, Felix, the floor is yours. Thank you for being here.
Thanks, Georg. So I share my screen and I hope you can successfully see what I'm going to present. All right. Again, thanks, Georg. Hi, everybody. So when Georg and I were preparing for the summit, as he mentioned, we were thinking about reasons why disclosure isn't promoting faster than it should be. And we really wanted to highlight something that could maybe a specialty of Europe's discourse, mainly stakeholder engagement. And by that, having an understanding about the psychological resistances, speaking with people, trying to engage them is a crucial topic. And for that, I'd like to, as a framing for the conversation that we're having tonight and for the conversations with all the other panelists, throw in a couple of notions that hopefully may give some inspiration for how we can move the topic of disclosure forward. So there are a couple of exterior resistances that we're all familiar of, and examples, not exclusive, would be, for instance, looking at what gatekeepers have in mind, the assessment that engaging UAP and NHI disclosure would be bad for personal interests, more altruistically for the country or humanity. Another reason might be that people would be bribed or threatened to oppose NHI disclosure, or simply following institutional paradigm policy order or NDA. This would be kind of the conspiratorial thinking Georg was hinting at. But we think less discussed, but very common, are interior psychological reasons, and I want to highlight two tonight. One would be avoiding cognitive dissonance of mainstream consensuality being challenged. And the second, avoiding of psychological overwhelm and fear facing the personal transformations that are necessary to be able to fit UAP and NHI into one's worldview. Georg, you mentioned already the statement of Chris Mellon that he held last week for the UAP Disclosure Fund. And in that statement, he was also addressing psychological resistance. And I quote, "What psychologists call cognitive dissonance describes a mechanism our minds employ to protect us from conflicting information that cause debilitating stress and anxiety. It is not hard to see why conscious recognition of an alien presence would, for many people, prove anxiety-producing, disruptive, and difficult to reconcile with society's prevailing view of reality. Simply stated, the issue of UAP and aliens is not only subtle and complex. For many people, it is also anxiety-producing and therefore exceptionally difficult to accept or to process." Luckily, in the last couple of years, we did a lot collectively to lower the cognitive dissonance and to create new alternative legitimizing narratives that give permissions to individuals to engage the topic. These would be scientific studies, declarations, media coverage, statements of key opinion leaders in interviews or books, whistleblower witnesses, political and public events, and last but not least, for every activist movement, a change of language. So when we are coming now looking at psychological resistance because of overwhelm and fear, it is helpful to have an understanding from the perspective of the psychology of transformation. And one framework, one of many that I like to throw in, is this curve that is called the change curve, which is widely used in change management, originally coming from psychologist Elizabeth Kübler-Ross in her work on grief. And what this curve basically tries to illustrate is that in any change, people move through a variety of psychological states and emotions before they finally are able to accept a new reality, starting with shock, denial, a frustration, then at the lowest point, the valley of tears, desperation and depression, then starting to experiment with the new reality, decision-making, and finally integration. And the specialty of the topic that we're discussing today is that unfortunately it is so multifaceted that it includes not only one transformation of worldview, but also a couple of others. Today, I will briefly go through 4 of them that are particularly relevant in my opinion. So the first one would be developing a mature relationship with institutions. Of course, we all grew up with trust in institutions, and this is part of the bedrock of our society. But when you deal with institutions, at some point it is important to develop a mature relationship that both has an appreciation for the role institutions play in society, but at the same time have an awareness of institutional dynamics, special interest, secrecy, lying, waste, and corruption, and holding these 2 realities at the same time rather than idealizing or refusing institutions altogether. A second transformation that is necessary to contain really this topic of UAP and NHI is to develop humility about the place of humanity in the evolutionary intelligence hierarchy, given with NHI being the more likely explanations of the UAP topic. And this includes basically moving from an anthropocentric point of view to embracing a reality in which we are not the pinnacle actually of creation. This humility can give us a fresh and more realistic look at our knowledge, understanding of the world, capabilities, and also of our moral judgments. But at least in the beginning, causes a humiliation that is a threshold to transformation, the same way like Earth not being the center of the universe in former times. The fourth one would be embracing consciousness as a feature fundamental to the universe, rather than identifying with a materialistic paradigm. This transformation is about living in a conscious reality in which mind and matter are co-creative, non-atomistic, and interdependent, which opens a whole new vista for understanding ourselves as human beings and rediscovering psychic faculties of the mind in ways to interact with reality. Ubiquity rising is very strong in exploring, for instance, psionics. The price of it is we don't have the security of having an nuts and bolt reality anymore. And going deeper into the topic of UAP, there are attached phenomena that we expose, of course, ourselves to if we allow that reality in, but it's necessary to contain the topic with all its aspects. And last but not least, and I'm looking very forward also to hear more about that from our panelist, Annahita Nezamio, in a moment, is embracing a planetary worldview. We have to transition from an egocentric, tribal, nationalistic point of view to a planetary citizenship. And with that come both the awe of living on a highly connected planet and the joy of being part of a large human family. Probably, as you all realized, watching news over the last, especially the last years and now the last days, exposing ourselves, or the planetary awareness comes with exposing ourselves to countless problems and enormous suffering and desperation in parts of our human family. So, alone from these 4 transformations, you see that it is a very complex thing and a very hard thing to engage stakeholders, because they may or not be already through these transformations. And it's actually a sequence. The key takeaways from my short presentation is UAP NHI disclosure and discussions can cause overwhelming anxiety. When we engage stakeholders, we therefore have to understand the limits and readiness of their current worldview and encompass these topics, and also the readiness of the discourses and the organizations that they're in. And for us as people that want to engage the topic and move it forward, it's important to understand which the right entry points to conversations are. And we need to be able to offer a broad spectrum of legitimizing narratives so that stakeholders can give themselves permission to explore the topic. So with that, I thank you for being able to share these ideas, and I'm looking forward to the next conversation and give it back to you, Georg.
Thank you, Felix. Thank you so much for this framing. There we go. Right. So now that we have kind of talked about worldviews, it's really all about maybe bringing in a psychologist, and we're very pleased to have Dr. Annahita Nezamio with us today. Are you there? Wonderful. And let me briefly introduce Annahita, because it's important to also talk about the psychology of paradigm shifts. Dr. Annahita is a chartered psychologist and researcher, fellow at Birkbeck University of London. She's an expert in human behavior and performance and specializes in the psychology of the overview effect, the psychological shift astronauts experience when viewing Earth from space. Driven by innovation, she pioneered Earthscape VR to simulate aspects of this transformative experience for digital therapies and programs. Dr. Nezamio is also a lecturer at the Kepler Space University. Notably, she is co-authoring an upcoming book with the psychology of the overview effect with Franck Maurin, and she champions the powerful idea that this broadened global perspective isn't just a fascinating phenomenon, but also a vital prerequisite for disclosure, preparing us for a greater cosmic awareness. So thank you so much for being with us, Dr.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invitation. Thank you, Georg, and Dr. Felix Hoch for inviting me to be part of the European Disclosure Summit.
Thank you. So maybe for starters, could you help us understand what this overview effect is that astronauts experience? How could we understand that?
So just to backtrack a little bit in terms of, I know we're limited on time, so I'll be brief, but the reasons to why I researched the overview effect. So as a psychologist, I'm interested in altered states of consciousness. I was very interested in this state of unity that certain groups of people, for example, people that participate in extreme sports, people who have near-death experiences, people who are involved in psychedelic-assisted therapies, experience. And I came across the overview effect and thought, wow, this is very, this sort of features some of these sort of transcendent-like characteristics. And so, with that being said, the overview effect is the direct experience that astronauts have when they go to space and see planet Earth firsthand from space. And this perspective allows them to really gain a new version of reality, if you like, where they can really national boundaries are no longer important and are not visible in the same way as we perceive them back on the ground. And they see Earth as a single ecosystem. And they experience things like powerful emotions, like awe, humility, and expanded sense of purpose. But more importantly, they have an experience that allows them to have a perspective shift, because they see the object in space and time as an object, and they are the observer, and that is the observed, as Plato would say. And so this is very important psychologically in terms of we really rely on conceptual and perceptual processing, and therefore in order to internalize phenomena all around us, these activation of these systems are very important. So that direct access to this experience that they have, I think, is particularly important in then the shifts that they experience afterwards, which is they develop a stronger connection to Earth, many of them nature, and many of them report becoming more active in environmental campaigns or humanitarian campaigns. And so it's a very interesting experience from a psychological perspective.
Very much so. And a lot of the things that you said also resonate with the many effects that people who had close encounters of the third kind describe. So one of the questions that is of course relevant for us today is if you think that we can learn something from this overview effect, from the psychology of this overview effect, to what is implied in this disclosure process that we're going through right now when it comes to UAPs.
Well, so I founded a company after my research in order to recreate aspects of the overview effect and other extraordinary and expansive nature-based experiences through virtual reality and digital therapeutics, very much sort of relying on principles of psychology and using psychological insight in order to create mental shifts in people ultimately, and to challenge pre-held beliefs that may be unhelpful or maybe too rigid. And so we're already trying to use this approach here on Earth, and we're testing our programs and trying to see if, you know, they do what we are hypothesizing that they do. But in relation to UAP, I think at the moment it's interesting because we live in a time where we were at a period where globalization was really taking off. We were expanding in terms of communication and information exchange. And so there was this interconnectivity happening and expanding out onto the world. And suddenly we're in, at the moment, because we've reached, and this happens in society, where there's patterns of chaos and crisis, we have reached yet another pivotal moment of chaos and crisis, where therefore people are beginning to go away from that. And they're beginning to turn more to nationalism and more away from globalism. And I'm not advocating for either, by the way, here, but I'm just sort of talking about a context within society in terms of how people are responding. And so with that being said, there is still that information exchange that is occurring and happening. And so people are beginning to experience, and people, I say that loosely, because I think it is different in different sort of nations and countries and regions. But on the whole, people, because of the access to information and knowledge, they are beginning to at least consider and engage with these ideas and debate these ideas more openly. I think many people are still being shunned or shut down, especially in the scientific communities, if they support or believe in this phenomena. However, I do think that there has been a shift in terms of the way we debate and talk and acknowledge this phenomena. And so I think we are on the sort of cusp of a seismic shift in terms of our belief structures. And again, that is coinciding with other monumental shifts in our scientific understanding. For example, in quantum physics, which don't ask me questions about quantum physics because I won't be able to answer them, but in quantum physics, in our understanding of engineering, how and systems, how systems work, and our understanding of life, as well as exoplanets and the cosmos itself. So this is all sort of coinciding at one time, and it's an interesting question to think, why now? So I'll stop there to see if you have any other questions.
Thank you so much. This is very helpful because, you know, in the next section, we're actually going to turn to these UAP education and media pioneers in Europe. And now having learned from Felix and from you what it takes, you know, to communicate an information that is so world-shattering that to actually be able to digest it, you would have to change a lot of your actual psychological makeup. It just really helps us to let this sink in, that this is not an information that is easily applied. It's not news of the usual kind that we would kind of read. And that's why this giggle factor is associated with it, or this fear factor, or this, you know, these types of reactions to it. So thank you so much, Dr. Annahita. We'll turn back to, yeah.
Can I add one quick point, just because I think an earlier speaker was talking about data, and I think it was Franck who was talking about data and data sets, and he had began collecting a data set. I wholeheartedly support that approach because now with the advent of AI and computer modeling systems, I think that we need to begin to collect all this evidence and categorize it and really begin to identify the conditions and the different contexts that this phenomena is giving rise to, and be able to categorize the legitimacy of these phenomena and ultimately try to falsify it through science.
Thank you, Dr. Nezamio. Thank you. I hope you can stick around, and maybe we can chime back to you in the final panel. But thank you so much for helping us kind of understand these obstacles when it comes to UAP education. And we're now going to turn in our next section to the different media in UAP education pioneers that we have here in Europe, because the question is, what does UAP education look like in practice, right? What are the challenges for public outreach? And we have with us here today Massimo Tampieri from Nova Luna. If you're there, Massimo, now is the moment to turn on your camera. And yeah, I'm great that you can join us, Massimo.
Hi, Georg. Good evening to everyone.
Yeah. So Massimo, you are the president and the founder of Luna Nova in Italy. And Luna Nova was launched in 2024 as an independent hub for UAP research, political outreach, critical dialogue. And you have been building networks and events that drive UAP disclosure forward in Italy and in Europe. And recently, you did actually the first Italian UAP conference in Turin this May. So it's great to have you with us, Massimo. How are you tonight?
Correct. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'm everything fine. Thanks. It's an honor for me to be here today and to have the opportunity to share this space with such knowledgeable and passionate individual. And I want sincerely thank you, Georg, for this invitation and for the extraordinary work he's doing alongside the Ubiquity University and the New Paradigm Institute. So to open a genuine international dialogue on a subject that has long been ignored, misunderstood, or ridiculed. And so I'm delighted to bring the voice of Luna Nova, a small initiative born in Italy that aspires to contribute to this new phase of awareness with humility, but also with determination. And so if you want, I can tell you something. I can
like one thing I'm really curious to hear, and we won't take long, but when you did this event in Turin in May, what was kind of your reaction? How did you feel the reaction of the Italian population? Do you think there has been made progress? Is there less stigma than it was earlier in Italy around the subject? What is your sense of this?
Yeah, there is a lot of stigma, in my opinion. And also for this reason, I want to explain what moved to create Luna Nova in this year in particular. And certainly a deeply personal passion has driven me for years, but what truly moved me to act was the realization that we have reached the point in my opinion, point of no return. And so we can no longer afford to spend time asking whether, say, if UAP phenomena exist. The data are there. Testimony from top-level scientists, pilot, insider are now public. And in the United States, startup dedicated to also system or new proportional anti-gravity, similar to anti-gravitic system are already emerging. And leading American physics speak openly about work done on exotic vehicle. So this means a small unelected group has had access to extremely advanced technology and decided to keep them hidden behind the veil of national security. Side Italy, let me say, I want to bring in Italy something of different, respect the normal association. We want to bring another kind of information to the people. I want to talk about the data with the people. We want to open a discussion with the government, not only in Italy, but obviously also at European level. And this is why I founded Luna Nova, so to bring knowledge and to give the people a chance to understand what the reality they know is only a part of the picture. What's been hidden or poorly explained is probably the most important matter of our time. And we are just getting started, but our goal is clear. So bring the discussion into the European institution, starting with the European Parliament. And to do that, we need obviously solid partnership, so international alliance and sponsors who believe in the value and seriousness of our work. Because serious dissemination takes more than enthusiastic. It requires scientists, former military personnel, politicians, theologians, doctors, philosophers. So we need a credible, competent network, because informing isn't about creating panic. It is about responsibility, guiding collective awakening and constructive change.
Yeah. Wow, there's really a lot there. And from what I can understand, there is this question, are UAPs a security threat, right? Often in America, this is the framing. Would you say that what is your opinion on this idea of framing UAPs?
Yeah, personality, but also as I can talk about Luna Nova, we don't agree that UAP should be treated as a national security issue. On the contrary, we believe that this narrative has been manipulated to funnel public fund to private military enterprise, especially in the United States, where the phenomenon has been managed in secrecy for decades by defense, contractor, and the war industry. Talking about threat without concrete evidence morally justify opacity, stock fear, and legitimize ever large arm budget, while preventing the scientist community and the citizen from accessing crucial information. Okay. If this object have been flying over our sky undisturbed for decades, as seems clear, and have never exhibited hostile behavior, then we must ask ourselves if they wanted to invade us with the technology they appear to possess, wouldn't they have done so already? So I think that the real threat is not a UAP, but how we are handling them in the silence, in secrecy, and throughout geopolitical competition. So in Europe, we should have the courage to take different paths, more aligned with scientist inquiry, exploration, and international collaboration. It may even signal a profound cultural shift.
Yeah. Thank you, Massimo. We're also joined by your colleague Sabrina Pieragostini. Yeah. Sabrina, are you with us? Let's see.
Hello.
There you are. Great to see you, Sabrina. Sabrina, you're also the vice president of Luna Nova, focused on communication, but most importantly, you're pretty famous in Italy. Many people recognize you when you go to the supermarket because Sabrina is actually, she has actually over 30 years of experience at Mediaset, Italy's biggest private TV group, where she was an anchorwoman and later the editor-in-chief. She's widely respected for her depth and responsible UAP phenomena mainstream news reporting. So, Sabrina, from what you heard here today, what is your sense of the situation of speaking openly on TV about UAPs, like, for example, in America on News Nation, there's a TV channel that streams hearings and all that. Is that possible in Italy? That's something you think is coming, or what is your sense of that?
So I believe that in the Italian press, but in general in Italy, at a political, social, cultural level, there isn't a real interest in the UAP issue and in the disclosure of this topic. If we were in a hospital and disclosure were a patient, I'd say the line is flat. Or better, maybe disclosure was never born in Italy. No one talks about it in the government, in the institutions, in the media, except the few like us who are interested. But what are 5 or also 10,000 people out of 58 millions of inhabitants? Talking about media, everything that is happening in the United States, the new whistleblowers who have come forward, the new initiatives of the US Congress, everything had a very small coverage in our media. A few articles, mostly online, and with an attitude negative or very critical. And the Italian press always approached the UFO or the UAP issue as a ridiculous, a comic topic, and this attitude hasn't changed. And so Italian journalists, when they are forced to talk about the topic, never do it in an objective or impartial way, but always with a skeptical and also a snobbish approach. For my personal experience, when I could talk about the UAP issue for the national television I worked for, I was considered a bit strange, a bit bizarre by my colleagues. And I could talk about this topic as long as my bosses, my editors, consider these topics not important but useful for ratings. Instead, my last boss thought that UAP were a silly thing, so he cancelled my TV program from one day to the next without even notifying me. That's the situation.
Wow. Well, that's pretty concerning. And do you think the stigma in Italy is connected somehow to the Catholic religion as well? Or what do you see there?
So, interesting question and difficult answer. I think that in Italy, the influence of Vatican is very strong, and not only from an ethical or moral point of view, as it should be, but unfortunately also political and a social influence. Even if some Catholic theologians in the past and the recent years have addressed the alien issue in an interesting way. For example, some years ago, the Vatican newspaper, Osservatore Romano, published a story entitled ET is my brother, written by the man who at the time was in charge of the Pope's astronomical observatory, Father Funes. I interviewed Father Funes, but he didn't repeat that sentence, never. And he was very able as a very good Jesuit to avoid every answers about aliens and about UFOs. So maybe they talk about these topics among themselves, but not to people. And probably the current interpretation of NHI capable of interacting with us on a consciousness level is one more reason to avoid it, because there is the risk that these beings from other worlds or from other dimension could be superimposed to traditional Christian Catholic concepts. For example, if good aliens are angels and bad aliens are demons, it's a big issue, it's a big deal for the church.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Wow, and like coming to the close, now that you're head of communications at Luna Nova, how do you see the way forward? Like, what could you think should be done next to kind of help make this subject less stigmatized in Europe, like this has been done in America?
Yes, it's very difficult, in my opinion. Maybe an official, authoritative position at international level would be needed, but not in words, also in facts. If Donald Trump or another important head of state or even United Nations talk about aliens among us, maybe more than 90% of the world population would take it as a joke. They wouldn't believe it. So we need proof, we need evidence, we need scientists who come forward and show us data. We need something concrete, I think. Or we should wait for a mass sighting, so great, so amazing, that no one will be able to dismiss it. Of course, it's very difficult. It that will happen. And so I think that stigma will remain for many years. I'm not optimist.
Yes, it's a very interesting point you make here with the mass sightings, because who knows what it would cause if today we would have a mass sighting like the Phoenix Lights or the Belgium wave, right? So thank you so much, Sabrina, for taking the time. I know it's getting late here in Europe, but thank you so much for being here with us. And we look forward to maybe seeing you in the panel later. And now, I am actually very honored to introduce Robert Fleischer. Robert Fleischer is by far the biggest voice in Germany when it comes to bringing the UAP topic to the public eye. He is part of ICER and founded Exopolitics in Germany in 2007, later launched Exo Magazine TV, an online media platform exploring UFOs, science, and the paranormal. And Robert somehow manages, I don't know how he does it, but he manages to connect the mainstream audiences with the disclosure discourse, the disclosure network in Germany. And he's also an author of a best-selling book here in Germany called Sie sind hier, was jetzt, which roughly translates to They are here, now what? So thank you so much for being here, Robert, with us today.
Thank you. I'm really honored to be a part of this summit. Thanks for inviting me.
That's great. So, well, the obvious question I think we need to ask is, do you think that the perception of this UAP theme has kind of changed in Germany since Grush in any way?
Absolutely. So first of all, I want to commend Sabrina for at least being able to bring up the topic in her TV shows, because when I was working for TV in Germany more than 20 years ago, I didn't even bring it. I didn't even manage to get it on the show. And so up until 2017, I would say the German media reporting on UFOs was mostly in side columns or ironic articles, right? And sightings were often dismissed as curiosities with references to little green men and stuff. And that's why, after all, I had started to report on this full time back in 2007. And there's a noticeable shift that happened in December 2017 when Luis Elizondo went public and revealed the existence of ATIP. And many leading German media reported on this with the overall tone became more serious but remained skeptical. And there are several milestones which made this process even or the tone, the paradigm shift in the tone even more serious. So around June 2021, there was a noticeable paradigm shift. For example, when Barack Obama, I think it was in May, Barack Obama went to the Late Late Show with James Corden, and there he said that there are things we cannot explain. It's a real mystery, and that is when German mass media really woke up and said, "Wow, it's the former U.S. president saying this. Now there must be something to it." And then 1 month later, they had the UAP task force report coming out, and this topic became a real media event. And so it was around June 2021 when journalists started to realize it's a real subject, and they started looking for experts in Germany. And they found Professor Hakan Kayal from the University of Würzburg, who has an interdisciplinary research center for extraterrestrial studies and was and still is the only university professor in Germany officially investigating UAP. And Professor Kayal's comments in the media also contributed to journalists taking the issue more seriously. And then so this went on. There were several more milestones when NASA announced they would form its own expert commissions to investigate UAP in June 2022. Several large news organizations reported on it. When Arrow was created, the German media reported on how UAP research is structured. So, and that's, I think, an important aspect that we may want to keep in mind for what's coming up in Europe, is that in the US, what we can see is that the institutionalization of UAP research, like building an official agency, introducing laws and having hearings, that this contributed even to more serious reporting in the German media and also in the United States. So I think that is what we need, what needs to be done in Europe. And then, of course, another milestone is the mysterious flying objects that were shot down over North America in February 2023, that even made it into Tagesschau, which is Germany's top evening news program. And they started to provide a sober assessment of why the US is suddenly interested in UAP, which is national security. And I also noticed that it was around that time that Bild, which is a German tabloid news organization, they invited me to participate in a talk show to talk about UAP. And in June 2023, after David Grush went public with his allegations about recovered and back-engineered UAPs, there was another leading German news magazine, Focus, that called me, and they asked me to start contributing on this subject, which I did. And so we brought a huge article on the hearing that happened in July 23, and that attracted a lot of attention also from many other media outlets who reported on it in a very sober tone. And so now I would say UAP reporting in leading German media outlets has transformed from a ridiculed niche topic to a serious area of reporting.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And what would you say is the biggest stigma that still exists around the subject in Germany? For example, we had Eric Davis in front of Congress people mentioning 3 different ET species. Is that something, I didn't see that being picked up in German news at all.
Well, I think it starts even earlier, you know, for scientists, for all I speak a lot with scientists, and for scientists tackling this or even engaging with this subject, even, you know, showing that you're interested in it may turn out to be career suicide for them, you know. So also there's what we need is an official body that is created that deals with this phenomenon in Germany, so that whistleblowers and researchers no longer have to fear that their own careers will suffer. And also there's this aspect of public mockery, you know. So whoever said anything about UFOs in the past, you know, was very easily ridiculed in in the mass media, which made it really difficult for anyone to show their interest. And also another thing is the general tendency of German mass media to equate UFO interested people with conspiracy crackpots. Like UFO headlines are often still put in the same category as Project Bluebeam, global elite chemtrails, stuff like QAnon, whatever. So whoever wants to talk objectively about UAP quickly ends up in the same box as QAnon believers. And so there are several driving factors, of course. There's the pop culture. People have been, led to believe that it's all about flying saucers, Hollywood aliens. They have been conditioned, actually, to hear UFOs and think of little green men, not of air safety or national security or even, wider implications of the subject. So I would say the biggest obstacle in German UAP research is not a lack of technology, but it's the social risk of being labeled a crackpot.
Yes, that's a very interesting point, especially after the pandemic. There was almost this split in German society regarding the way the pandemic was treated by the government, where we have this idea of being a Querdenker, and many kind of not mainstream ways of seeing the world have been subsumed by this weird term, you're a Querdenker. And I think UAP somehow went under that umbrella as well, don't you think, to some extent?
Well, I have reported on both subjects during the coronavirus crisis, and I somehow managed to keep them apart. So for some reason, I didn't fall into this thing. I mean, after all, it's all about keeping up the journalistic basic rules of investigation, of finding out, or at least approximating the truth, or having good sources, and not being activist in some way. I think it's a difficult situation as a journalist, because I've been reporting about this as of 2007, and I think in 2010 or so, Die Welt, which is a large German newspaper, called me Germany's top alien lobbyist, just because I was reporting on the subject. So you see, it's really difficult to maintain like a serious position in this field. But anyway, yeah.
Thank you so much, Robert, for this report from Germany. I hope to see you back in the panel towards the end. We'll now move to see what the situation is like in Portugal. And we're very happy to have Francisco Mourão Corrêa with us. Hi, Francisco. How are you tonight?
Hello, Georg. Thank you for the invitation to be here and to be part of this summit and this interesting conversation that deals with UFOs and disclosure, etc.
Let me say a few words about you, because many people from the US may not know you. They should, but they may not. Because Francisco Mourão Corrêa leads the Portuguese Exopolitics Initiative that works with the Center of the Transdisciplinary Studies of Consciousness, which is a research think tank based at the University of Fernando Pessoa in Porto, Portugal. He is furthermore the director of the European Academic and Strategic Outreach of the Society for UAP Studies, and serves as representative of ISA and co-founder. And so after having kind of heard Robert and the others, how do you compare what they have said to the situation in Portugal? Is it also, are you also labeled kind of as a conspiracy person just because you're into UAPs, or how is the situation? What is it like?
Fortunately not. Because my positions regarding UFOs are always in terms of evidence-based and scientifically, critically approach, like CTEC, the Transdisciplinary Center for Consciousness Studies, which is an advanced research center critically and scientifically focused on investigating topics that may be considered frontier of science, like mind, body, spirit, altered states of consciousness, and anomalous phenomena that pose a challenge to the mainstream science. So, and again, we have different academics from different universities, from different fields of knowledge or disciplines that approach these gray areas of science, and specifically UFOs. And so my approach has always been cautious and more evidence-based, and that's why fortunately I have not suffered that stamp of conspiracy theory.
But then it must also be that the cultural climate in Portugal seems to be more open to this kind of phenomenon,
yes,
maybe.
More or less. The environment is as skeptical as at any other place. It is more maybe open-minded or less, how can I say, we are indeed a case study in the sense that we had two former chief of staff of the Air Force that had their own cases, their own observations, and they both spoke publicly about their own cases. And one of them, in coordination with the team from CTEC, was able it was another time where the military were less dependent on the political will, and they allowed for a sort of a protocol of research between the Portuguese Air Force and these civilian researchers. So, which allowed the civilian researchers to go into the air bases and military bases and interview pilots and military men, etc. And so in that sense, yes, we like in the 80s already opened all the files to the public, and every now and then there are TV stations that go and interview again or revisit those sightings. So there's still some stigma, of course, but TVs and media have been showing an interest since there, we can see a difference. For instance, Portugal had a dictatorship for over about 40 years that ended in 1974, and after that, because it was a very close society to the exterior, there was a jump in terms of different things, maybe like UAPs. So there was a big interest from society to learn more about the subject. Then it faded away, but still there have been some TV stations or radio stations that promote programs, series about the subject. For instance, the national TV station made a series about the most interesting cases that were researched by CTEC. And so it was like 12, 16 episodes about the most interesting cases involving the military as well. And so, yeah, there's a mix between some stigma from some people, but generally there's also some openness to discuss the phenomenon.
Yeah. And you have contributed to a very extensive documentary series on UAP sightings in Europe, right? That people can also see on YouTube. What is it called again?
UFO Europe, The Untold Stories. It's, I believe, 8 or 9 episode series, and Portugal has some few cases. I was part of more or less of the production in terms of choosing the cases and introducing the people and making the connection to allow to be filmed inside the airbase, for instance.
It's really great stuff. UFO
and for
Europe.
the History Channel as well. We did the same.
So it's even on YouTube. I found it. It's called UFO.
Yes, both are in the YouTube. YouTube.
Yeah, UFO Europe Untold Stories. I recommend everybody to check out the series. It's free on YouTube, and Francisco does a really great job of kind of going through all these different sightings. And final question. Do you see some kind of connection because of the language to what is happening in Brazil? Is there kind of a cultural exchange when it comes to UAP kind of acknowledgement with Brazil, or is that not the case?
There's a difference in terms of approach between Europe and the US or South America, in my view. Europe is a lot more conservative in terms of approaching, more skeptical. The US is more communicative, and we know a lot about what happens in the US, right? And that's why people also tend to think that the phenomena is exclusive to the US when it's a global phenomena everywhere.
It's true. People think that. People think that in Europe.
Yeah, exactly. They don't know. But there are cases all across the globe. But specifically into the South America, which the society is more open to the spiritual connection. And indeed, there are plenty of amazing cases in South America, specifically in Brazil, where they also open the files. There have been some Senate hearings there as well. Society is clearly much more open to discuss ufology or UAPs and strange phenomena. It's a little bit different still in Europe, as Francisco Guerreiro also showed in terms of the impact, the relatively low impact that the hearing at the European Parliament took to the mainstream media.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Francisco. We will reconnect in the panel in a few moments, but
thank you.
Now I would like to kind of look over the pond to the part of Europe that wanted to leave the European Union, but is still very relative and close to our heart. And we're talking, of course, about the UK. Gary, are you still with us?
Yes, I am very happy to be here.
Can't see you yet. Let me turn off. There you are.
There you go. First of all, I just want to thank you for inviting me to this prestigious event. I think events like this are very much needed, especially in the European context.
Thank you, Gary. I mean, just to let people know a little bit about you, in case they don't know you, which I hope they do. So you are a retired police detective and also the vice president of ICER. And one of the cases that you have investigated very deeply is the Rendlesham Forest case. You also did a course here at Ubiquity last year. And this very in-depth investigation has now led to your first book, Non-Human. And you were on Ross Coulthard speaking about that recently. But you're also a big kind of advocate of UAP disclosure in Britain and connected to many people like Louis Alessandro around it. So how does this conversation sit with you? What is the UK's kind of stance on this, being kind of in Europe geographically, but politically somewhat differently positioned, right? Or what is your sense?
Well, I really don't think that the fact that we've technically left the EU makes any difference. We're all Europeans when all's said and done, and that's an artificial network, as it were, politicians. I look at it that I'm a European, and you know, we're a very proud set of nations, and it's a discussion that we should be having more and more. And I think in many ways we have lagged behind the developments in the United States. And I think that's been borne out by many of the people that have spoken here today. Historically, from the UK's point of view, we were always pretty much hand in glove with America on the UFO UAP issue. But that actually has changed significantly post 2017 when Luis Elizondo, ATIP, and the 3 Navy videos came out. Now, whilst in the United States, it really, I think, shook a lot of Americans, a lot of scientists became more interested, and the media certainly took it more serious than they did. Strange things happened in the UK. We're actually out of step with America on this issue post 2017. And what I mean by that is that the UK, in terms of politics seems to have regressed. It's very hard to get any politician to engage on the subject of UAP. In February of 2024, I launched another initiative, Pilots Reporting UAP. This is over the UK, and I put a team of investigators together, put press releases out, wrote to the Federal Aviation industry, to unions, and put out lots of press releases to the national media in the UK, and none of them replied, which tells you something. And yet, we know that there is actually a lot going on behind the scenes, because an Australian researcher called Grant Levac has done some very good work online with FOI. He's Australian, and he put in an FOI request about the Five Eyes. Now, for those that are not familiar with Five Eyes, it is mentioned in many contexts, but what it is basically is from the Second World War. It's a collection of nations, of which the UK, Australia, New Zealand, Canada are involved. And when you look at the situation, we know that through a Freedom of Information request, we know that all of the Five Eyes countries were briefed in a full day, one-day conference at the Pentagon in May of 2023, and a document has confirmed that. Now, what you've got to understand is that on the one hand, you've got clearly UFO, UAP briefings are going ahead behind the scenes, but politically, nobody would go near the subject. Now, we still get the media, as compared with countries like Germany and Italy, the media in the UK have often been treated the subject quite well. As a former detective, I have never been ridiculed, I guess because of the job that I did. But the media are still, whilst they've improved, they're still not ready to commit to a big transition. And I think that's because of this difference in opinion. I think if America suddenly did disclose and say, it's real, NHI is real, then I think that would change pretty much overnight, and we would follow America's lead. But at the moment, there is this really strange situation where politically nobody's interested, but behind the scenes we know that UAP discussions are taking place.
Yeah, it's very, very true. The media are committed to AI here in Germany. Nobody's doubting that it's the future. Everybody's nervous about it, and they're trying to follow the news, and it's not being giggled at, unlike before ChatGPT. But somehow these very important events in the US have not created this momentum in Germany or in Europe, as you say. So my question would be, what is your concern that we are delayed in greater transparency and coverage on this issue? Do you think we have a lot of time to slowly brief people? What do you think is needed right now?
I think the reality is let's look at politics and then look at the media in the UK. I think that the UK politicians, right up to ministerial level, are vastly underinformed, underbriefed on the UAP NHI reality. And I think that's pretty much the same for the media. Unfortunately, the media often work hand in glove with politics at various levels and various different outlets. And so I think it's been held back. So I think that it wouldn't take a lot if America disclosed for there to be an overnight huge interest, because we've always been reported on the subject. Whilst it's been ridiculed, there has been a lot of serious good journalism done over the years, but I think we need to do more. And I think from a European perspective, I mean, I'm vice president of ISA, which is on 30 countries around the world on 4 different continents, but I think Europe specifically needs to come together. And in a sense, a discussion like this, which to all intents and purposes, is a European online summit about UAP. These are needed because it's bringing in scientists, bringing in various different backgrounds and different perspectives. And I think one of the things that you could do from an event like today is to create a European organization of people, like-minded people who want to come together specifically for Europe to try to promote the idea in terms of media and politics in what would be our respective countries. I mean, we've got many countries represented today here at this event, and a lot of those people could come forward. Now, it shouldn't matter what your background is as long as you've got an expertise of sorts to come to the fore. And it should always be evidence-based. It should always be scientific-based where possible. You know, as a former detective, I can only ever look at the subject through evidential eyes. I had 30 years of police evidential training for that. And scientists have their own particular rules that they follow. But surely we can all work together for a common good, which is, I kind of liken it to the elephant in the room. You know, in the UK at the moment, there's a huge number of world political events going on, but the Prime Minister has been talking about a strategic defence review, which is basically what defence elements can be foreseen over the next 10 years. And nobody's mentioning UAP. And that's ridiculous because we're on the cusp. I genuinely believe we are on the cusp of disclosure simply through technology. We're getting better sensors, better radar. There's more of an acceptance in the United States. We're getting more and more videos. We're getting more congressmen and women and certain senators involved who want to push for transparency. I think the world events at the moment are probably holding it back at the moment. So I think it's just a question of bad timing. I think the recent trailer that came out, Age of Disclosure, that actually aired at a small cinema festival, a film festival in the Midwest in the United States, I think in probably April, got rave reviews. However, it was then not released, and it still hasn't been released. And I suspect that was possibly going to be used to educate people as and when there's some kind of discussion and admission that we're dealing with NHI. That is coming through technology. So I recently wrote an essay that I put out on my UFO Truth Magazine blog page, and people can access that, and I'll put a link up through into the chat. But basically, it was, you know, I actually think that the way it's going, it might be catastrophic disclosure, which may result by a delay. And the reason why I say that is that, and you mentioned it, and we talked about it in the pre-preparation for this event, is I've been saying for several years now that if there was a Phoenix-like event like the Phoenix Lights in 1997, if it occurred tomorrow with the advent of 4K, 8K smart telephones, smart technology, and live streaming capabilities, that you would in effect not be able to control the flow of media. Once you start go live streaming to a live event of a huge mile-wide boomerang-shaped UFO over Phoenix, and it was tracked for over 200 miles, estimates of 50,000 people saw it, then instead of 1997 when you had blurry, grainy videos, and you could then control the media to an extent to create doubt, I don't think you could do that now. So if we had a mass event now, the cat's out of the bag, and that would cause a lot of ontological shock, because straight away you're going from one day it's normal and nobody's talking about are we alone, and then the next day, yes, we're dealing with something that's non-human, whatever its origin, it's non-human, and we're into a totally different world, and the world will never be the same. And I think that's the risk that we take. So
that's a very, very good point, Gary. I think what we kind of have to understand here in Europe is that we really have to get prepared for the disclosure that's happening anyway. We kind of have to get the minimal viable response in place to be positioned to just address all these different aspects.
Well, it's education. in the end, as the vice president of ISA, we see ourselves as the educationalists, and we develop courses in the same way that Ubiquity University has done the same, and the New Paradigm Institute are doing things similarly. Basically, Europe should be working together, our leading people from all walks of life, coming together with like-minded people with the similar ideals to advance this subject and create a discussion with politicians or with the highest levels of media. We have to raise the profile, and events like this can only be good. And what Francisco Guerreiro did in the EU was brilliant, because it raised an issue that should have been addressed. We do know that behind the scenes there are EU discussions. I have a colleague in ISA, Chris Gaffney, who regularly sends me little updates, because he's an FOI hound, and he basically has got several little admissions about certain aspects of the EU discussing it. But we need to be able to work together as a group. Historically, ufology, for want of a better word, has been very poor at organizing itself into structure that has any real impact. And there's been so much infighting and backbiting in so many areas, and the egos so many times, historically going back to the 1950s, that we have never progressed as a lobbyist element. And we really should have moved beyond that. And I think the time is coming that we really need to do that and come together from all walks, all specialisms, and really start pursuing these European questions, because we're in Europe. It's on our doorstep, and this may well happen soon. And if we're not careful, we're into the worst case scenario of a catastrophic disclosure.
Thank you, Gary. These are very wise words, and I think you mentioned before that we have to bring in the scientists, right? So
of course we do.
I think now is a good moment to kind of move forward to our next section, and we'll hear from you later on in the final comments, hopefully. But I also want to bring in now people from the world of European aerospace. After having heard about the media pioneers in Europe and activists and authors and researchers, I would like to introduce Dr. Egbert Edelbroek, if you're still there. Hi, Dr. Egbert Edelbroek.
Absolutely.
How are you?
Hi, Georg. Good to be here.
So I want to briefly introduce you so people know who you are. You are a Dutch innovator and founder of and the CEO of Spaceborne United, a pioneering research company focused on enabling human reproduction in space by advancing IVF technologies for use beyond Earth. You're also passionate about making humanity a multiplanetary species. And in fact, you just sent up your first research unit into orbit via SpaceX in April. So thank you very much for being here.
It's an honor to join the summit.
Thank you. Well, we've heard a lot about media and history and research, but my question to you, who are very, very connected to the European aerospace sector, is what is your sense of this UAP disclosure conversation with people at ESA, in NATO, that control our access to space?
Yeah, so there's really differences between the different groups. I speak with scientists, engineers, policymakers, astronauts, and sometimes investors. Looking at the scientists in Europe and engineers, I'd say with some 25%, I can really well discuss the UAP topic, including what's happening in the US. Also with some investors, actually. But really many people in the space sector seem completely unaware and refusing to look at available facts. Especially strange is how these high-ranking, very well-connected scientists seem unaware and unwilling to look at available data. You can't have real discussions with them. Even with those who actually focus on finding life beyond Earth. And then there's astronauts. That's a special category, but let's get to that in a minute.
Yes, and what is your sense of basically the subject being discussed behind closed doors in Europe? I heard from you that it's very different, like certain people, you can talk to other people, they they giggle or they don't take you serious about it. Do you think there is a sense of preparedness for the subject, or in general, nobody is briefed?
Absolutely, that there's many people who are being briefed. A lot is happening behind closed doors. I've had the honor of speaking to the highest ranked officers in the military intelligence, and they confirmed that, yeah, the department is fully aware. There's policies for how to deal with the phenomena. The leadership also confirms that 90% of all astronauts, they experience the UAP in one way or another. Earlier, Dr. Nezamio discussed the overview effect that astronauts experience, but obviously a crucial part of their space experience is not mentioned. So I really hope that soon we can openly speak about, well, let's say their close encounter effect. But to be clear, the public version of that overview effect is really valuable, and I support the work of Dr. Nezamio. So I have spoken to quite a few astronauts, with some also about the UAP topic, but they're simply not allowed to publicly disclose their encounters. I've also spoken to jet fighter pilots, Europeans. Of course, same as in the US, they experience UAP during missions. But the legislation for Air Force personnel, whistleblowers, yeah, that really needs improvement.
And how do you think the private aerospace sector should engage the subject in Europe? How do you engage it?
Yeah, it's I can talk about opportunities and threats related to the topic with colleagues. Certainly not with all colleagues. They clearly, yeah, they're not aware. They're in another bubble. They don't wanna hear the facts. But in my company, there can be an impact for sure on the long term. But looking at other companies, it's interesting to see a movement towards accelerating discussions about opportunities they want to seize. They're looking at San Francisco area and those regions, where more companies openly prepare to be one of the first to benefit from, yeah, let's say the post-disclosure world. And I think in Europe, the aerospace companies should also accelerate their strategic discussions, the SWOT analysis, the strengths and weaknesses, but especially the opportunities and threats. They need to be updated, and yeah, companies should accelerate these discussions, and ideally, of course, guided by the help of the available experts that are in this summit and so many other summits. But I don't think that the sector, the aerospace sector, will be actually coordinating this at all. It should be more of a grassroots approach, I guess.
Well, thank you so much. It's really a privilege and rare to hear people in Europe that work in your field come out and acknowledge that this is to some extent known about and being discussed in your field, right? I mean, who are we talking about? We're talking about ESA, we're talking about NATO, we're talking about your private friends, that there is a discussion going on, but somehow we don't talk about it in Europe as much as the US does. There's no platform somehow.
That's true, and I think it would be good if there would be more, yeah, European open task forces. It's clear that there are already task forces, but yeah, not openly, and we need different ones. The existing ones are not public. They're most likely with a very strong military focus, while we need task forces who focus on yeah, not perceiving the UAP as a threat, but on focusing on opportunities. And if we want to expand the human comfort zone and consciousness, Europe has a responsibility to contribute, and task force can certainly help with that.
Yes. Thank you so much, Egbert. We're going to move to the next scientist in our round, and the final speaker for today, Dr. Andrea Lani. How are you today?
Yes, I'm great. Actually, I want to start by thanking you again and the Ubiquity University for this opportunity to talk.
Oh, it's our pleasure. We had you on Humanity Rising before, and I think you're such an important voice here in Europe, but not only in Europe. So let me briefly kind of frame to people who maybe do not know you all the work that you've been doing in this. So you're an aerospace engineer, right? And a computational scientist that works kind of at the connection between hard science and exterior research. You're born in Italy, you're based right now in Belgium since many years. You hold a PhD in engineering sciences. You have collaborated with NASA, Stanford, NATO Science and Technology, and the Van Carmack Institute for Advanced Aerospace Projects. You have authored over 100 scientific papers, including in the top aerospace journals, and now you're joining us from San Francisco, where you just actually went to the conference for the Scientific Coalition of UAP Studies at the Von Braun Center in Huntsville, Alabama. How does this conversation we had so far sit with you as we come towards the end? How do you see the difference between the scientific discussion in America that you just saw at the conference and in Europe?
Well, generally speaking, I think it is an exciting time to be alive and involved in this life-changing topic. Also scientifically, there is definitely a difference between Europe and US. But for instance, this event organized by the Scientific Coalition is international in nature. And there were really great news coming out of that meeting because since just a month, 3 journal papers have been published on progress in aerospace sciences. And this is the top journal for aerospace research, very high impact factor. And this can be, especially one of the paper, there are 3 papers, but one of the paper, the one of Kevin Knut, is sort of foundational for the establishment of UAP science. It's a massive paper, 34 authors, under 95 pages, and 506 references. So people who want to get into this subject also scientifically can start with this paper and have a broad overview of phenomenology and also some data that have been collected during the last decades. And so actually this paper kind of turns science fiction and conspiracy, if you want, into science fact. And now it's acknowledged by the main platform for research in aerospace. That was really a great deal. The timing of the conference was perfect. And I guess now will be time to, promote a little bit this achievement by Kevin Knut and all his collaborators. In this conference, there was also Jay Stratton, who is himself an aerospace engineer, but also he had, let's say, high position of power inside the DIA, the Navy intelligence, and actually was the one who assembled the UAP task force of the Pentagon. He didn't cover really too much technical or scientific aspect. He just talk about how he actually got to create this group, this task force, and all the challenges he had to face. And also, it was some sort of unification of different agencies working with different parts of the government. There was like FBI and the Navy and so on. And he tried to put them all together, except for one agency that didn't collaborate. I assume this was CIA, but he didn't mention it. But yeah, so it was interesting. It was a breath of fresh air. There were other nice discussion. For instance, Matthew Sidagis, who worked with the UAPX. He was also a professor like Kevin Knut of astrophysics in physics, let's say, in Albany University. He mentioned catastrophic disclosure, and he tried to prove it with statistical analysis, also considering that now the level of technology that we have now, with everybody hanging around with high quality cameras in the phone, this really like asks for some event, not let's say, makes possible to actually record in real time possible, global events or stuff like that. So he actually estimates, like many others, that 2027 is a sort of target for having some sort of catastrophic disclosure. And he explains it scientifically. Then there was Akan Kayal that we already mentioned. He spoke about his AI-based detection tracking system. Another interesting topic was also a sort of investigation of a plasmoid event in US. I think it was in Michigan. I'm not 100% sure. And this was Ben Hansen, so TV host and ex-FBI agent, and Doug Butner, who is actually ex-NASA, also a scientist for the DoD. And then there was somebody from the Galileo project, Laura Domine, and then also some analysis, some cluster statistical analysis about the different shapes of UFOs by Stephen Bruel, who is actually an anesthesiologist. He's a professor of anesthesiology, but he can apply his scientific methods to study UFOs. So, yeah.
Let me jump in there because I think, and I know it's getting late and we will open the panel discussion any moment now, but there are two things that kind of bring us into this panel discussion that you mentioned. So do you think that there's still any kind of doubt about the NHI hypothesis being the most, with the most explanatory power, the best hypothesis we have right now? Are people all committed to this hypothesis at this in the field right now, or do you think if it's not leading, it's still open?
I would say most UAP researchers who really look at the data, they have to agree then there is a NHI presence, because the level of performance, these famous 5 observables that were put on the table by Lou are tell you that it's something that is not human. And also on that also you can add biological effects and injuries, which are also, for which we also have records, and that adds to the effects of these encounters. But
okay. You mentioned the term interdisciplinary, and I think this is a great moment to kind of open up the panel for those who want to comment on this, because I think there are so many different angles that we can contribute to this. Andrea, you mentioned that UAP have so many different aspects that we all need to account for. Felix, maybe if you want to, as we come to an end, as you have listened to all of this, take your perspective on it and maybe see how we can proceed as we come to a close. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Georg. Thanks, Andrea. Yeah, so as we're wrapping up, trying to harvest what we experienced here tonight as a European forum of researchers, activists, media representatives, and so on and so forth. I think we want to have one final question that has in part already been addressed by some of the statements, but moving forward, there are 2 questions that are on our mind, and these would be from your point of view, and please, as Georg said, open your mic, turn on your camera if you like. What is Europe's unique contribution to that disclosure process compared to the United States? And what is actually the infrastructure that we need to create for ourselves as Europeans to leverage this contribution and to support us and the process? So with that, we'd like to hand it to whoever wants to open his mic.
I have one very short answer. There's a significant difference in dealing with fear between US citizens and European citizens. I've researched how people deal with fear and courage development, and Europeans are less sensitive to the fear-based narrative than the US. So there could be an opportunity there.
I agree.
Go on, Robert. Go on, Robert.
I think that Europe, especially European science, has to contribute a lot more than hints to a threat to national security or something. Like, I talk a lot to scientists. I really appreciated Annahita Nezamio's contribution about the overview effect, and there are a lot more scientists in Europe who deal with the let's say, the wider implications of this phenomenon, the implications for our concept of reality itself, because I think that's, after all, what this is all about, which makes it even more difficult for politicians to tackle the subject, because it's not just about non-human intelligence, it's about questioning, after all, the nature of what is all around us.
May I say something, Georg? I think
first Gary and then Francisco.
Right, thank you. Where I see that Europe can add a unique voice or a particular interesting voice is the diversity of our nations in Europe. If you think about it, a lot of Americans are so insular that they believe that UFOs only occur in the United States, when we know it's a worldwide phenomenon. Well, in Europe, we have many countries, and really we should have a database, a scientific database of the best cases of Europe. And yet we haven't even got that. And we should. And that will be one of the things that would be part of a European task force for me. That if we had a European set of delegates that come together, one of the things would be the history. And one of the things that Europe shows very convincingly, with an absolute wealth of historical, brilliant cases from the French wave, the Belgian wave, UK waves, is that we have so many diverse cases of every kind, and they should be listed in a database as one of the functions of this task force. The history, the science, all needs to come together, but we have a unique perspective and we don't really deal with it. One of the things that I think that we need, and I think all ufology, for want of a better phrase, is we need a financial backer. We really need somebody who is a multimillionaire to say, yes, I've had close encounters myself. I don't want to give you my details. I don't want them out there, but I will fund the initiative. We need money. We need money to have a voice. And I think we struggle. I think all organizations struggle without a financial backing.
Thanks, Gary. Francisco. You're still muted.
Yes, sorry. Just adding the fact that given the fact that Europe is a lot more conservative in the approach to the phenomena, is more diverse, there's multicultural factors to consider. We are all different. And I believe that one aspect, one detail that may change the needle is the involvement of academia. Not only, well, it started with Würzburg. You have also the Institute of Physics, where Beatriz Villarroel is doing a great job with her project Vasco. I think the more faculty departments, the more universities involved officially in the study of the phenomena, it may help trigger a different understanding from society and help eventually to propel the grassroots movement to ask for more transparency. That's my take.
Great. Thanks, Francisco. Annahita.
So I think I agree with all the wonderful ideas of the panelists, and I think that some sort of a working group, as well as some research that can spearhead this, and perhaps it's the way that we're framing the position of the approach and the position of this research. I'm very interested, for example, in the work of Sarah Marnie Walker and the emergence of life. She's a physicist, a theoretical physicist, and Peter Levine. And we are now, from my understanding, are making breakthroughs in terms of theories and scientific evidence in terms of, on a cellular or a microscopic level, what happens in terms of communication between cells and the emergence of life, but also on the macro level in terms of the Big Bang Theory and breaking traditional views in terms of what's happened. And so this phenomena that is occurring, it could be framed in a way that could look at consciousness, or could be looking at life and the emergence of life and the complexity of life, and setting hypotheses around those topics, I think, would make this more appealing in terms of generating funding, as Gary was saying. But beyond that, I think we live in a culture of sensationalism, we live in a culture of misinformation, disinformation, and so, okay, yes, as Europeans, some of the nations have perhaps had their doors closed or been more skeptical in terms of their approach. I'm not sure that necessarily that's a bad thing. I think that Europe is speaking, and we should listen, that we need to come up with systems and scientific approach that is viable, that can collate the information, that can look at the information, that can test it. And I think that it's not necessarily about just looking at the objective information. It's also the subjective cases that will also help us form essential hypotheses and ideas. But yeah, thank you so much. It's been fascinating hearing everyone speak.
Thank you so much, Annahita. Robert, you lowered your hand?
Yes, well, I just wanted to add one thing, but I think Roberto was first.
So
who's raising his hand as well, Roberto.
Then I'll hand it to you, Roberto.
Okay, now just a brief consideration. Europe is surely a mix of different attitudes, but we should consider surely one thing. From a political point of view, we should forget the possibility that the European Union may do anything for UFOs. Consider that in Italy, we had 3 different European honorable who were helped by us to present different requests to the European government. No problem. All these attempts failed. So we must aware that politics in Europe has nothing to do with UFOs. Only this consideration.
Thank you, Roberto.
Yes.
Nothing.
So may I add to this, Felix?
Yeah, jump in, please.
Yeah, I agree with Roberto because the big problem that I have is when I speak with politicians, is that there is no support for any disclosure movement whatsoever, because this is a subject that has no lobby, it has no winners. Like, if you disclose the existence of a higher intelligence that is superior to us and to politicians, it would be, as Chris Mellon once said, it would be an unnatural act for a government to say that there is something higher than themselves. Also think about the economic repercussions, the societal repercussions. Political scientist Alexander Wendt talked about the potential rise of totalitarian states just in the event that a government would announce the existence of a non-human intelligence. And that is not to say that they would disclose the technology as well. So there's a lot of problems, and I think the biggest political obstacles that I see in Europe are, first of all, international secrecy agreements within NATO, because they are all part of NATO, except for probably very few countries in Europe. And so whenever something unidentified happens in the European sky, this is channeled into secret military information, right? And then also keep in mind that there are certain countries like Germany who may have bilateral military agreements with the United States, where cases involving the US military in Europe are often handled under US leadership. Like, there are examples in Germany, for example, I think it was in 1976 when a small aircraft was encountered a UFO. He called for Mayday because he had trouble maintaining the flight altitude. And then 2 US Air Force jets arrived, the object left, and they escorted him back to the airport. And there he was interrogated for 3 hours by US Air Force personnel on German soil. and he was told never to talk about it, but they didn't manage to make him sign an NDA. So this is just one of the examples. And I once talked to a very high-ranking member of the German military who told me that you must understand, Robert, that Germany did not have was not a sovereign state after World War II, and that the air supremacy was divided among the Allied powers. So whenever something unidentified happened in the German skies, it was handed over to the Americans. And it may very well be that this has continued to this day. And that's the reason why in Germany, no one feels responsible for this, because this has led to some sort of resignation. And so last thing I want to say is, so if let's say Europe sets up a UAP task force and tries to find out what individual member states know about this subject and how to deal with it, they may stumble across some very uncomfortable truths and some very bad things that happened in the past that do not shed a very good light on the sovereignty of individual European member states.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Robert. Andrea.
Yes. Well, I would just like to give a comment. So basically, we are in the middle of some sort of second Copernican revolution in which humans acknowledge that they are not at the center of the universe. It was hard to establish the first one. We cannot expect this one to be easier. And actually, it's even more challenging because in the second revolution, it's not only a scientific matter, we are also including the discovery of the true human potential, psychic abilities, healing abilities, multidimensional nature, all connect to the phenomenon. And possibly even the meaning of life itself within a greater universal perspective. Now, it would be nice to lead the efforts. I mean, Europe led the effort for the first Copernican revolutions. Now it looks like we are lagging a little bit behind. First thing, we should try to capitalize a little bit on the efforts of and successes of US-driven initiatives. Ignorance, I think, is a big problem in Europe because the phenomenon is really not known, at least in academic environments, for instance. So we really need some more outreach efforts. And of course, public funding is needed. It's nice, as Gary say, to find some billionaire or millionaire that can fund this kind of research. But in order to really make progress, we need to have some structural public funding. And so there should be efforts to approach each of the funding agencies at the national and European level and try to see if something can move forward. With little steps, maybe with very confined research projects mostly focus on technology or something that, they can see the benefit, an immediate benefit. So EU Horizon Europe program, the EU Defense Agency, ESA, NATO, and so on. And so we have to show that there is some benefits for whoever is in power or ruling in these agencies, that there is some tangible benefit in technology, also financially speaking. And so I think there is potential, and I make just one example. So we see these objects flying hypersonic without creating any sonic boom and without creating shock waves or heating or anything. If you would be able to master a technology like that, you would basically disrupt the aerospace technology. So you would make all space mission easier. You could enable hypersonic, airliners, for instance, which is a hot topic at the moment. We have to pass through the technology and then eventually later go more towards the spiritual side and whatever. And the other thing is that we have to do is when we look at the experiencer, we try to find ways of objectivizing the subjective experiences through technology and data analysis and collection. And modern technology do allow that. For instance, hyperspectral cameras can be used to collect data like UAP, track UAPs and whatever, but also you can investigate, for instance, the biophotonic field around people that actually appear to change. And I was involved in some experiments to prove that they change when you have contact experiences. And now they are started talking about biophotons related to, if you are alive, you emit biophotons. If you die, they stop emitting. So there is, a global momentum, and we should try to really find, some key topics to push forward and also contact the right funding agencies.
But just to quickly add one point to Dr. Lani's points, with the advent of generalized, AI and advanced technologies, we are already putting these advanced technologies could go to rogue agents or agents that are wanting to cause or create chaos and problems in the world, or perhaps government agencies who are seeking power or authority over different nations. And these power games have played on since civilization began, so none of us are unclear about that. So at this point where AI is now expanding and suddenly sort of breaking through, then to bring forward these innovative technologies and have that open source, I suppose if I was a government personnel working at the higher ranks in government, I may have some issues with that in terms of protecting, especially at these very difficult times, protecting those very important information. So I just wanted to add in terms of, as you said, timing is essential and important in terms of when we release and this information, this data, and this research.
Thanks, Andrea, and thanks, Annahita, for the addition. So, last but not least, maybe not the last, but is also holding up his hand. Franck, would you unmute your microphone and open your camera? Turn on your camera. We can't hear you for the moment.
I can't open it.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah, perfect now.
Wow.
I could say that one of the idea to interest journalists on the general public will be to present and summarize the most reliable database on the world of UFO. For example, military reports coming from CHOP clearance list, coming from Blue Book Unknown. We have 700 cases in unidentified. We can also use the database of UFO encounters by pilots. In the Dominic Weinstein report, you have 1,300 report. The NARCAP says that he has collected 3,500 report. And also the great civilian wave of UFO reported. On this reliable information could interest the general public and show that there is a reality behind the UFO phenomena, and to prove that the flight performance are far above of the official aeronautic. This is the idea.
Thank you very much, Franck. Robert.
Yes, one last thing, just very quickly. We live in an extremely polarized world these days. Catastrophic disclosure cannot be in the interest of anybody, because after all, we want to survive, we want to survive. Our civilization must go on. And also, I think we should not expect too much from any government, because, as I said, it's just an unnatural act for them to disclose something that is higher than themselves. So I think the way to go for us as civilians is, to go the way where Annahita Nezamio is going, what Felix was talking about, building our own society, our own ethical standards, trying to be able to live with each other, coexist peacefully. And I think if we achieve this to a certain degree, then it will be much easier to deal with the fact that we are not alone.
Thanks, Robert. And nice final word for wrapping up that panel. Thanks, everybody, for engaging with that question. And for the wrap-up of the summit itself, I'll hand it back to you, Georg.
Thank you, Felix. Thank you, everybody, for these wonderful comments. I want to thank everybody for staying with us for so long and contributing, showing up today, to all the people who promoted this on social media. We've been streaming on 5 different platforms. And there's one thing that you can right now do to support this global effort. It's being led by the US, for better or worse, which is the UAPD Disclosure Act petition, which is about the upcoming legislation where you can also write as a person from anywhere in the world to state your concern and your interest in having this policy be promoted. So I've put that into the chat. And well, this was certainly just the beginning. I know there were many countries and many perspectives where we will not be able to represent. We already went almost 3 hours, and I want to thank everybody for basically the wonderful chat and the wonderful discussion. So I hope this is the beginning of a wonderful friendship and a wonderful new chapter in the European disclosure movement with all these great people that I got to know while preparing this conference. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
And see you around. And if you want to learn more about what Ubiquity University is doing, I also put that chat link in. You can Google us, and we do many things regarding ET studies. For example, in-person events with Chris Bledsoe coming up in August, or more theoretical courses, such as with Gary Heseltine last year. And I believe it's important that we push forward this idea of UAP education in Europe, maybe with some of the people who are present here today, to offer courses that really put Europe on the map and show this richness and diverseness of the UAP history and presence in Europe. Thank you very much, and have a wonderful rest of the evening or day, wherever you are. Bye-bye.